A toddler's innocence lost. What happens when a little girl with an irresistible smile vanishes into thin air? Who do you trust when the very people meant to protect her may hold the answers? This is the story of Ayla Reynolds, a case that gripped a nation, tore a family apart, and left behind haunting questions that still linger in the shadows. It began on an ordinary night in Waterville, Maine, a quiet town with quiet lives. Ayla, just 20 months old, was tucked into her crib. Her father, Justin DiPietro, claimed he checked on her before going to bed. But by morning, the child was gone. No signs of forced entry, no footprints leading away from the house, just an empty crib and a chilling 911 call. The questions started immediately. Who could have taken Ayla? Why wasn't there a single clue outside? And most haunting of all, how could a child disappear from her father's home while he and 2 other adults slept just feet away? The media descended upon Waterville, and the story quickly became a national sensation. But as the days turned into weeks, a troubling narrative began to emerge. Blood in the house, contradictions in Justin's story, and a mother's desperate fight for justice against a wall of silence. What really happened to Ayla Reynolds that night? Let's dive into the case that would expose cracks in a family, shake a community, and leave a nation searching for answers. A broken family and silent tensions. Ayla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010, into a fractured family dynamic. Her mother, Trista Reynolds, was a young woman fighting to build a life for herself and her daughter. Her father, Justin DiPietro, was reluctant to embrace fatherhood, even questioning whether Ayla was his. It wasn't until a court-ordered paternity test in mid-2010 confirmed his parentage that he acknowledged the toddler as his daughter. Despite the legal affirmation, Justin's involvement in Ayla's life was minimal. Trista became Ayla's primary caregiver, raising her daughter with love and resilience. By 2011, Trista had another child, Raymond Jr., with her fiancé. For her, life was challenging but full of purpose. For Justin, Ayla was little more than an obligation, sporadically visiting his daughter, rarely stepping into the role of a committed father. The tension between the 2 parents simmered below the surface, but it was an October 2011 call from Child Protective Services, CPS, that would upend their fragile balance. Trista, grappling with substance abuse issues, was given an ultimatum: enter rehabilitation or risk losing custody of her children. Determined to keep her family together, Trista entered a 10-day rehab program, leaving Ayla and Raymond Jr. in the care of her mother and sister. What happened next was a chain of decisions that would forever alter the course of Ayla's life. Justin, claiming his paternal rights, took Ayla into his custody. With the backing of CPS, Ayla was removed from the safety of her maternal relatives and placed in Justin's home, a house shared with his mother, Phoebe DiPietro, his sister, Elisha, and her infant daughter. Trista protested the decision vehemently, warning CPS of Justin's alleged abusive tendencies and his lack of involvement in Ayla's life. Her family begged the agency to reconsider, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. A father's rights outweigh an aunt's, CPS officials stated, coldly dismissing the concerns. Ayla was handed over, her small hands clutching her aunt's shirt as she cried and resisted being taken. Ayla's move into Justin's home was supposed to be temporary, a brief adjustment period while Trista completed her rehabilitation. But as the days passed, it became clear that Justin had no intention of returning Ayla to her mother. What began as a custody dispute was about to spiral into something far darker. The night everything changed. December 16, 2011 was an unremarkable winter evening in Waterville, Maine. Snow dusted the ground, the streets were quiet, and families were tucked inside their homes. Inside the DiPietro house, Justin DiPietro claimed it was a routine night. He said he put 20-month-old Ayla to bed around 8 p.m. in her crib on the first floor. His mother, Phoebe, was upstairs. His sister, Elisha, was in another room. and his girlfriend, Courtney Roberts, stayed in the basement with Justin. By morning, everything was shattered. At 8:49 a.m. on December 17th, Justin called 911 to report Ayla missing. "She's gone," he said, his voice frantic. He explained that he had woken up to find her crib empty and immediately assumed she had been kidnapped. When police arrived, they found no signs of forced entry. The house was secure, the doors locked, and there were no footprints in the fresh snow outside. Ayla's blanket and favorite doll were still in her crib, untouched, as if she had simply evaporated. Justin insisted someone must have broken in and taken her. But how? Why was nothing disturbed? And why had no one heard a thing? Trista Reynolds received the news while traveling to visit her fiancé, who was incarcerated in a correctional facility near the Canadian border. When her father-in-law pulled the car over and told her that Ayla was missing, she froze. The words didn't seem real. She tried to call Justin, but he didn't answer. Her mind raced as she imagined her little girl cold, scared, or worse. By the time she reached the police station in Waterville, her confusion had turned to terror. Trista pleaded with officers to find her daughter, but their questions about custody arrangements, her recent rehab stay, and her relationship with Justin hinted at suspicion. Trista felt the weight of being a mother under scrutiny while her child's whereabouts were unknown. Meanwhile, the search for Ayla began in earnest. Local police, state troopers, and the FBI descended on the DiPietro house. A command center was set up, and search teams scoured the neighborhood. Bloodhounds traced Ayla's scent as far as the driveway, but no further. Volunteers combed nearby woods, and divers plunged into the Kennebec River, but there was no sign of the toddler. The media quickly picked up the story, and Ayla's face was splashed across news outlets nationwide. The public was captivated by the mystery. How could a child disappear from a locked house with no evidence of an intruder? As days turned into weeks, the focus of the investigation began to shift from finding Ayla to uncovering what really happened inside the DiPietro home that night. A house of secrets. As investigators dug deeper into the DiPietro household, their findings painted a chilling picture. Justin's story about an intruder began to unravel. Forensic evidence collected from the house raised far more questions than it answered, and suspicion soon fell squarely on the people inside. In Ayla's crib, investigators found faint bloodstains. Nearby, on the floor, were more blood droplets. The forensic team expanded their search, and what they uncovered in the basement was horrific. On Justin's mattress, a large pool of blood was discovered. The volume wasn't just a few drops, it was significant, enough to suggest a catastrophic injury. Blood spatter patterns on the walls and floor indicated blunt force trauma. Ayla's tiny pink sneakers, sitting innocently by the crib, had blood on them. So did her favorite doll, its arms and face smeared as if she had tried to clean herself with it. Blood was even found inside Justin's sneakers and on the tongue of his shoes. Each piece of evidence painted a horrifying image. Ayla had suffered, and it had happened in that house. Yet Justin maintained his innocence. He claimed Ayla's blood could have been from a prior injury, a ridiculous explanation, investigators thought, considering the sheer amount of blood discovered. Justin's mother, Phoebe, and sister, Elisha, backed him up, repeating his story of a mysterious intruder. But neither of them could explain how someone could enter the locked home, abduct Ayla, and vanish without a trace. Trista was shown the evidence by police, and her worst fears were confirmed. The blood pattern suggested internal injuries, possibly from coughing or vomiting blood. She couldn't bear to look at the photos for long. A child's mattress soaked in blood, a doll smeared with evidence of pain. It was too much. She left the room in tears, convinced more than ever that Justin had harmed her daughter. The DiPietro family's reaction to the evidence, or lack thereof, only deepened the mystery. Justin displayed no emotion when presented with the forensic findings. When investigators showed the same photos to Phoebe and Elisha, they refused to look, dismissing them as irrelevant. Courtney Roberts, Justin's girlfriend, was similarly silent. Not one of them could provide a coherent explanation for the blood. The public was furious. Media outlets pressed Justin for answers, but he remained tight-lipped. When he finally appeared on television weeks later, his calm demeanor unnerved viewers. "I have no idea what happened to Ayla," he said, "but I know someone out there does." His words sounded hollow, rehearsed, as if he were distancing himself from the truth. With no confession and no solid alibi, investigators were left with a chilling puzzle. If Justin and his family knew what had happened to Ayla, why weren't they speaking? And if they were innocent, why wasn't there a single shred of evidence to support their claims of an intruder? The investigation takes a dark turn. As weeks turned into months, the focus of the investigation shifted from finding Ayla to uncovering the truth about what happened inside the DiPietro home. The evidence spoke louder than words, and law enforcement began to publicly challenge the family's narrative. The discovery of Ayla's blood throughout the house suggested that she hadn't simply vanished. Something terrible had happened, and it was clear that the people in the house weren't telling the whole story. Detectives began piecing together a timeline of the night Ayla disappeared. They learned that Justin, instead of immediately calling 911 after discovering Ayla was missing, had left the house early that morning. He claimed he had driven to Portland, thinking Trista or her family had taken Ayla. But this explanation made little sense. Justin never called Trista during the drive. Instead, he made a curious phone call to a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy for Ayla just weeks earlier. The revelation of the life insurance policy sent shockwaves through the case. Why would a father, who had been largely absent from his daughter's life, suddenly take out such a significant policy? Trista, heartbroken and angry, openly accused Justin of premeditating something sinister. "He planned this," she told reporters. "He knew exactly what he was doing." Meanwhile, the DiPietro family's behavior raised more red flags. Neighbors reported that the family had spent the days following Ayla's disappearance cleaning the house. The basement, where most of the blood evidence was found, had been scrubbed extensively. Justin claimed this was routine housekeeping, but investigators weren't convinced. The FBI and Maine State Police intensified their efforts. Search teams returned to the DiPietro home, this time armed with luminol, a chemical that reveals hidden blood traces. The results were damning. Streaks of blood were discovered on the basement walls, floor, and even the ceiling, evidence of a violent event. The patterns suggested Ayla had been struck with significant force, and some splatter indicated she might have coughed or vomited blood before succumbing to her injuries. Forensic experts analyzed the evidence further. The size and placement of the blood drops matched Ayla's height, leaving no doubt about their origin. Some stains were the size of dimes, indicating trauma from a blunt object. The findings were horrific, and yet no arrests were made. The lack of a body and direct witnesses left prosecutors without enough to file charges. The public's frustration mounted. Trista continued to push for answers, appearing on news programs and organizing vigils to keep Ayla's name in the spotlight. "I won't stop until I get justice for my daughter," she vowed. But Justin and his family remained silent, refusing to answer questions or acknowledge the mounting evidence against them. As the investigation reached its 6-month mark, law enforcement made a grim announcement. They believed it was unlikely Ayla was still alive. The search for a missing toddler had officially become a criminal investigation. But with no body and no confession, the case remained stuck in limbo, leaving everyone to wonder, how could a 20-month-old girl disappear without someone being held accountable? The fight for justice. By mid-2012, Ayla Reynolds' disappearance was no longer treated as a simple missing person case. Investigators had publicly ruled out the possibility of an intruder and began focusing solely on the 3 adults who were in the DiPietro home the night Ayla vanished: Justin, his sister Alicia, and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts. Despite this focus, none of them provided new information or showed any willingness to cooperate. The evidence against the DiPietro family continued to pile up. investigators revealed that Ayla's blood was found in several locations throughout the house, including a bloodstain on Justin's sneakers and a pool of blood on the mattress where he and Courtney slept. They disclosed that the amount of blood found was significant enough to suggest a life-threatening injury. Ayla's mother, Trista, was devastated but refused to back down. Her heartbreak turned to determination as she became an advocate for her daughter, pushing law enforcement to stay on the case and demanding accountability from the DiPietro family. In interviews, Trista made emotional pleas, calling on Justin to tell the truth. "You know what happened to Ayla," she said during one televised appearance. "You owe it to her to come clean." The DiPietros, however, remained eerily silent. When presented with the forensic findings, their reactions were disturbingly cold. Justin's mother, Phoebe, dismissed the evidence as irrelevant, and his sister, Elisha, claimed it was being misinterpreted. Courtney Roberts avoided the spotlight entirely, refusing to answer questions from both the media and law enforcement. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Trista took legal action. In 2017, she successfully petitioned a judge to declare Ayla legally dead. This decision opened the door for her to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin. The lawsuit alleged that Justin was responsible for Ayla's death through intentional, unlawful acts and sought to hold him accountable for the pain and suffering her daughter endured. Justin denied the allegations and called the lawsuit baseless, but Trista wasn't deterred. "This isn't about money," she told reporters. "This is about getting the truth out. Someone needs to answer for what happened to my baby." Revelations and suspicions. As the lawsuit progressed, new and troubling details about Justin's behavior came to light. Investigators discovered that, in the week leading up to Ayla's disappearance, Justin had sent Trista cryptic messages expressing fear that someone might try to take Ayla. He claimed he was worried about her safety, but his actions told a different story. On the morning Ayla disappeared, Justin reportedly drove to Portland and back, claiming he thought Trista had taken the child. But instead of contacting Trista or her family, he made a call to his friend, the same friend who had sold him the $25,000 life insurance policy for Ayla just weeks earlier. The timing of the policy raised eyebrows, with many questioning Justin's motives. Why would he take out such a substantial policy on a child he rarely saw? And why had he stayed at that same friend's house during the early days of the investigation? The inconsistencies in Justin's actions, combined with the damning forensic evidence, painted a grim picture. Yet, without a body or direct witness testimony, law enforcement struggled to move the case forward. The public's outrage grew, with many accusing the justice system of failing Ayla and her family. A mother's relentless pursuit. Trista Reynolds refused to let her daughter's memory fade. She organized vigils, spoke at rallies, and worked tirelessly to keep Ayla's name in the media. Her determination inspired a community of supporters who joined her fight for justice. But even with public pressure, the case remained stagnant. In 2018, Trista expanded her wrongful death lawsuit to include Justin's mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Elisha. She alleged that they had helped cover up Ayla's death and obstructed the investigation. The lawsuit became a focal point for Trista's quest for answers, though she acknowledged that it was unlikely to result in financial compensation. "This is about accountability," she said. "It's about making sure Ayla's story is never forgotten." The lawsuit dragged on for years, with the DiPietros maintaining their innocence and refusing to cooperate. Meanwhile, the investigation into Ayla's disappearance remained active, but progress was slow. Detectives continued to follow leads, but without new evidence, the case was at a standstill. The legacy of Ayla Reynolds. As of today, Ayla's disappearance remains one of Maine's most haunting unsolved cases. Her story has become a symbol of the systemic failures that allowed a vulnerable child to fall through the cracks. For Trista, the fight for justice is far from over. "I'll never stop," she said in a recent interview. "Until the truth comes out, I'll keep fighting for Ayla." The case has left a lasting impact on the community, serving as a stark reminder of the importance of accountability and the devastating consequences of silence. Ayla's memory lives on through the efforts of her mother and the countless people who refuse to let her story fade into obscurity. Subscribe to our channel for compelling true crime stories, justice-driven investigations, and the voices that demand accountability. Together, we can shine a light on the truth.